Welcome to this week's edition of Bowl Season Stories. I'm Nick Carparelli, the Executive Director of Bowl Season. And each week, different guests from the world of college football join me to talk about current topics in the sport, as well as discuss what they remember most about their bowl game experiences. Our guests include members of the media, former players, coaches, sports executives, and even fans will share their favorite bowl season stories with you. Today, we are joined by former West Virginia Mountaineer and NFL tight end Anthony Becht and Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl Executive Director Scott Glaser. Also joining me, as she does each week, is our on-air producer, Angela Lang. Angela, can you believe this weekend is already week 5 of the college football season?
You know what, Nick? I can't believe it. And I feel like we've learned so much in these first 5 weeks, but there's so much we don't know, right? I mean, it's so many storylines developing. Is there anything that's surprising you as we're heading into week 5?
Well, I've learned that nothing surprises me in college football anymore, and I'm looking forward to talking to Anthony about that a little bit. But I'm just excited that there's going to be a group of schools that get their 5th win this week, which means they're one game away from punching their ticket to bowl season, which is always exciting.
Yeah, and I know you have some exciting initiatives coming up. We'll be talking about that in some later editions of the podcast related to folks being bowl season bound. But before we really get to that into week 6, as we look ahead to those teams that get to punch their ticket, we want to talk about what's going on heading into week 5. And to do that, we'll bring in Anthony Becht, who you mentioned played more than a decade in the NFL, also was a star tight end at West Virginia, and has plenty of bowl season stories to share. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hey, Angela. Hey, I appreciate you having me on. This is great. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Anthony, you and I have known each other for a little bit now. You know, back you were an analyst on ESPN for a long time. Back when I was running football at the Big East, I saw you at games. You'd always come to our big clam bake meeting.
Oh man, love that clam bake, man. The greatest kickoff to any conference in the history of college football. At least I've been around. I totally miss those gigs. That's for sure.
I do as well. Just seeing the student athletes' eyes when the bed of lobsters was unveiled was something to behold. But you know, and I seem to run into you when I'm down in Tampa at various functions as well. It's always good to see you. I've always had a lot of respect for you personally and professionally. So it's really special for me to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, no doubt, Nick. Absolutely. Same with me. I mean, you know, you've done some really good things. You've really moved around some really important, jobs and labels and conferences, and overseen a lot of important things. And, you know, and of course, I like to follow your family and what you guys are doing, your boys and stuff, which is pretty cool as well. So it's been great. It's good to be on.
Yeah, thank you for that. So let's talk about the current, this current year. When you look around college football, pretty wide open this year. You know, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU, a handful of others, they're having their struggles. You know, even Oklahoma, your Mountaineers couldn't close the deal last week. I thought they had them beat, but all the conferences seem wide open. Even Alabama looks semi-mortal. You know, how do you view things this year as we're getting into really the middle third of the season here?
Yeah, you're right. I love it. I love the fact that it's difficult to figure out who the top teams are. And I think we find more information out every single week. This week, Alabama and Ole Miss is going to be a great matchup. Can somebody finally break through and beat Alabama during the regular season? I mean, you talk about offenses. This one you don't want to miss, because Ole Miss is all over the place with Corral and Kiffin, the way they do their offense. I mean, all the way down to Clemson. I mean, they're hanging on by a thread in the top 25. You know, they haven't really been able to get off the ground either. And you look at their struggles and their offensive line and their quarterback. You know, it's nice when you have Deshaun Watson for a couple of years and then Trevor Lawrence, and now, okay, you got to start over. It seems like it's not as easy as maybe Alabama makes it look every year when they have, Bryce Young playing quarterback who looks like he's grooming himself to be the next great quarterback in Alabama. And then some surprise teams, for instance, Michigan State. I mean, they look really good early on in the Big Ten. Not a lot of people are talking about them. Maryland's undefeated. I got a small, obviously, interest in Iowa State. They had a tough loss last week, but, they're a team that returned all their players. And, could they make some noise here in the stretch of the season here to probably get back on track? So you're right. There's a lot of exciting teams. Oregon, teams that have a lot to play and a lot to prove. And we know with college football, anything can happen.
Anthony, tell us a little bit more about your interest in Iowa State.
Yeah, so my son is a senior quarterback down here at Wiregrass Ranch High School in North Tampa. He committed to Iowa State back in April. among several other schools that he had interest and some offers from. And he's super excited. He's able to commit. He's going to leave early in January so he can get the ball rolling and be a part of it. They got a great program. I think Matt Campbell, to me, is unbiasedly one of the great college coaches in college. And I think the reason why is, one, they're winning, but I know my son goes and plays under him. He's going to become a better person, a better man, and he's going to win some football games too doing it. So really fun stuff. I coach high school. I'm the coordinator for the team this year, trying to help out any way I can. And it's been fun to kind of spend that time with him. But yeah, Iowa State's definitely on our radar every single week.
Yeah, that provides a really different dynamic when your son gets to that level. I have a son who's a freshman in college playing baseball, and I'll be looking forward to talking to you again in a few years, compare how you saw your experiences in college and playing in bowl games versus how you see it through your son's eyes. That'll be very, very different for you.
No social media when we went. That's the difference right there. That's
probably a good thing for you.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about you a little bit more now, and then get into your experiences playing for the Mountaineers and in bowl games. You had a great career at West Virginia. You left as second among tight ends in catches, 10 touchdowns. You're an honorable mention All-American, team MVP, drafted in the first round by the Jets. With all that you accomplished at West Virginia, what are some of the things that stand out most in your mind from all those experiences in Morgantown?
Yeah, I wish I could sit here and tell you I had a bunch of offers and options. West Virginia was my only offer and only scholarship of all levels of football to play. So I was kind of forced to go there, which is great. I didn't know anything about them. I had watched a game they were on the year after they played Florida in the Sugar Bowl, I believe in '93. That next season, I happened to catch them. I think they opened up in Nebraska and they got thrashed. And that was about it. So, after that, it was like, okay, well, I want to play D1. I wasn't very big. I was 6'5". I was a smaller tight end. I had to pick up some weight, but I had potential. And they believed in me. So they brought me out there with very low expectations. And, I was able to build myself up, get in the weight room, and really kind of nurture myself. And all of a sudden, I became, a starter and a first-round draft pick. So I owe a lot to them. My memories are this. Number one of the best fan bases in the country. If you ever go to a West Virginia game, I mean, they love their players. They love football. There is no professional team in the state. A lot of them are Steelers fans just because. But from a location standpoint, everybody loves the Mountaineers. The fan base are awesome. I have a lot of great relationships and friends and deep-rooted, obviously, connections within that state. And, I met my wife at school at West Virginia. She's also from West Virginia. So I always go back and they embrace me with a lot of love. The old mantra of the top party schools in the country. Well, when I was coming out, West Virginia, they were not only top 10, they were number one. It got to a point where they weren't even in the rankings anymore. They just said, okay, West Virginia, you're clearly the number one party school. And then there's everybody else. So that was interesting too, because there's a lot to do in Morgantown. There's a lot of bars, a lot of students. Everybody thinks West Virginia is kind of off the grid. But I remember a lot of kids from PA, New Jersey, Maryland, Long Island, all those kids that would come there and go to college. It was just a great experience for me. And just a rich tradition. Don Nealon was the head coach at the time. He basically started that program after Bobby Bowden had left for a small tenured stay there and went to Florida State. He really built that from the ground up. No one knew about West Virginia, and he made it a household name, a team that people were afraid to play. They made some really good runs with Major Harris in the late 90s. And then, of course, that team in 92, 93, where they ran the table with Jake Kelchner, the quarterback, and really made some noise. So it was great to be part of that tradition. I learned a lot of that once I arrived.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the fact that you weren't highly recruited. You hear a lot about the 5-star guys that everybody wants. And of course, there's tons and tons of guys who aren't good enough and don't have a chance. But a guy like you, I'm sure you were confident in high school. You thought you were pretty good. You weren't sure how good. All you needed was somebody to believe in you and give you that chance.
I got a really interesting story. When I went on my visit, I had a really good high school team. I was probably the 5th or 6th best player on the team. We were good overall. We had a lot of good players. and no one really expected me, since I wasn't getting a lot of love from schools, to go and play at somewhere like West Virginia. So when I took my visit, I don't think anybody was anticipating me coming back and saying, hey, I got offered a scholarship. It was very late in the process. It was about 10 days before signing day. I was holding out for hope. 1AA, which was called at that time the Yankee Conference, Boston, Northeastern, Delaware, Villanova, they just wouldn't pull the trigger on me. And I was, it was a frustrating time. So I went up, and they brought me up because the tight end that they originally wanted had decommitted, backed out. They went back and saw my film, and they said, you know what, let's bring him up. The funny story was, I sat in Don Nealon's office that weekend. It was short because it was snowing. There was a storm. It was one lane down from Pittsburgh to Morgantown. It took forever to get there. I remember sitting in his office, and he's like, Anthony, he's like, we really like your tape. We evaluate it. You're a guy, obviously, you're going to have to build your body. You're going to have to get stronger. You're going to have to get faster. He's like, hopefully by your junior or senior year, you'll be able to provide some help with us, at least special teams wise, for the school. And, for me, I was just like, whatever. I heard that, and I was like, okay, so what are you saying, coach? He's like, well, do you want to be a Mountaineer? And it just hit me like, wow, I'm getting an opportunity to play for Division I football at West Virginia. The Big East, who you know of at that time, was the echelon of college football. They just had a lot of great teams, the Miamis, the BCs, the Syracuse, McNabb, all those schools were really strong at that time. And from there, you're right. It was an opportunity that was a small crack in the window, but I squeezed my big butt through that as best I could. And I made the most of it. The strength program was really good. I really hit the weight room. I sacrificed every spring break and stayed and lifted. My summers were there. I didn't go home. And I just was truly committed on being great at college. Never really had aspirations of the NFL, but just wanted to fulfill all the doubt that was out there about folks saying, hey, you probably shouldn't go to West Virginia. You can go to a D2 school. You can play now, get an education. You weren't highly recruited. It's so hard to go out and do that. And I just said, you know what, man, I'm going to take a flyer. I'm going to push myself to the limit and just believe in what I was doing. And, with a little bit of luck in the certain situations, you find yourself in a spring game where you made some big catches as a sophomore, and all of a sudden you're on the radar. And after that, the trajectory went up, and it was just a great experience. I was just glad I had that opportunity, because who knows, I was going to go D2. I was going to go to IUP. At the time, IUP was the best D2 school. Back in the mid-90s. They were winning national championships. They were getting a lot of transfers. We talk about that portal from a lot of big-time schools. And I was like, man, I'll just go there, because that's where all the best other guys are. And it worked out for me, and I'm thankful for the opportunity.
That's a great story. You believed in yourself. You found somebody that believed in you, and you made it work. And when you were there, you got a chance to go to several bowl games.
Yes.
The Gator Bowl against North Carolina, the CarQuest Bowl in Miami against Georgia Tech, the Insight Bowl in Tucson at the time,
Yep,
I believe, against Missouri. All those games were pretty close. Came up a little short, but overall, what was that experience like for you? You traveled to Florida and Arizona with your friends, your teammates, the events, the food. Pull back the curtain for us a little bit. Like we all watched the games on TV. We saw what happened between the lines, but what kind of fun is in store for student athletes when they go to these bowl games?
Yeah, coming from Philly, I never really got a chance to go to Disney every year, or Florida, or these different spots. And it really was my first experience of traveling. Like, you travel to a game, you're there and you leave, right? So you don't get to experience anything. But when you go to Florida and the Fort Lauderdale area, when we're at the CarQuest Bowl, we got to do all the fun things, the beach bashes and the different, events where you eat and you get, some gifting and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff was great. I was a kid that, came from a modern conservative family, but it was, you didn't have those luxuries. It was like you just kind of took it for what you had. But those were like the rewards for putting in a great season. I think we all get kind of drawn into like, we got to win the national championship. It's bust. Like, there are some super bowls out there that do an awesome job. CarQuest Bowl was one of them down in Fort Lauderdale. Then we went earlier. It was the number 1 defense in the country, West Virginia, versus the number 2 defense in the country, North Carolina. Mac Brown had that team cooking. They had Julius Peppers, Bonnie Holiday, Dre Bly. I mean, it was like an NFL all-pro roster you were going against, but we were the number 1 defense. So it was a battle. I was a young player. I got some reps, but just going against players like that, trying to block Bonnie Holiday and going against a young Peppers, man, that was a challenge. I mean, it was like, wow, like this is a huge game. The Gator Bowl in Jacksonville just great presence. Fan bases traveled down. My family got to go to all these games and celebrate it with me as well. And, you stay at the really fancy hotels. So all those things were good. And then, of course, my junior year was probably the best bowl. We didn't get to go my senior to a bowl game, but Insight.com was good because we were a team that was had a good year, but there was a lot of expectations for the senior season. So that was kind of like our launching pad for us. And we played a really good Missouri team. If you guys remember, Corby Jones was the quarterback. He was kind of ahead of his time a little bit. He was like that dual threat guy that could do some great things. But the one matchup that people don't remember or think about much, and I always bring this up when I call college football game, Barry Odom was the outside linebacker for Missouri at that time. Barry obviously had a head coaching stint at Missouri, and then he's the DC now at Arkansas. And every time I called a game where he coached at, whether it was at Memphis as a DC, I always brought that up in our meeting, talked about how I used to school him. I think I had like almost 100 yards receiving in that game. And I said, everything I ran was off that outside linebacker. I think his name was Barry Odom. And that always came up in our meetings. So they were great times. They're really memories that I'll have. I mean, I still got my rings and my watches in my drawer here. And they are fond memories that I have. And I know that the kids, even though the perception in the fan base and media is all about national championship and the big bowls, those bowls meant something to me as a player. And those are memories you can never take away from.
As a young football fan, you grew up in Pennsylvania. Did you have a favorite college team you rooted for? And how about bowl games as a youngster? Did you watch bowl games on New Year's Day? What was your perception of them at the time versus when it became reality for you?
Okay, yeah. So I was a diehard Notre Dame fan. Like, if I had socks, hats, T-shirts, anything you can think of, Lou Holtz, Tony Rice, Bettis, Rocket, Tim Brown. I mean, even basketball. I just adore. There wasn't a lot of sports channels with basketball, but I would try to find that little sports network that had them because they played a team on the East Coast or Villanova or Temple, and try to watch LaFonso Ellis and stuff. But I loved them. I mean, yeah, every game we played early Saturday in the morning in my CYO football days, and I would run home and we would go watch Notre Dame games because they were on TV. That was like the main school that was on TV. And I wanted to be a Fighting Irish player. I wanted to go there. And I remember getting that letter from Lou Holtz my senior year. And it was signed and said, hey, listen, you're not good enough to get a scholarship, but if you want to come walk on, you're feel free to come up and come play. And it kind of killed me. And it became the highs to the lows, but that was the team I rooted for and wanted to be a part of the most. And then from a bowl standpoint, absolutely. I would sit and watch, a lot of, from what I remember, a lot of the big bowl games were kind of on 2 days, right? So you had 2 or 3 one day, and then the next day another one. I would watch all of them, man. I mean, clearly watch the one Notre Dame were in, and they were in some big ones, obviously, at that point. But just, getting to know some of the other major bowls at that time, watching Orange, watching Cotton, watching the Fiesta, those were sit down, what time are they on? Let's find those games and get involved and watch them for sure. Those were great days.
Last thing, Anthony, you're a busy guy. You're a talented guy. You've made Tampa your home. You coach your son's high school football team. You do pregame, postgame for the Jets. You were an ESPN analyst. You have a new podcast. I want you to mention that in a second. I knew all those things about you, but one day, several years ago, I'm flipping through the channel. I don't watch the Home Shopping Network very often, but it caught my eye. I said, "Is that Anthony?" Now, usually I see some attractive woman selling things, but you're on there selling a knife set or Tupperware or something. I know the Home Shopping Network is based in Tampa. Tell us about that gig. How did you get it? It doesn't look super hard, but it looks like a lot of fun.
Okay, so a couple of things with that. Number one, I wasn't selling knives and Tupperware. I was the official co-host of the NFL Football Fan Shop. So we sold all the officially licensed NFL products. I was obviously the co-host for the show, and then I would be paired up with someone else that one of the studio hosts that worked there. But my job was to represent 20 plus companies that had NFL licensed products. I may have been selling NFL knives at that time when you watched it on, but that's what my job was. And you talk about it, it looked easy. I'll tell you, it was the hardest thing to do because here's how it works. There's 5 cameras. All right. You have a running board that tells you immediate sales, calls, and numbers that's in front of you. And your goal, obviously, in that window is to get as many and drum up as many people to buy, your products, to watch, to get on and stay on as long as possible. Also, with the director in your ear, getting you to 5 different cameras. When you're calling a game or in a studio, it's either 1 or 2, or you're just watching the game from where you are. Also, in that situation, it's an hour straight, no commercials. So I would literally, in some instances, for instance, if there was a NFL throw, I would have 20 minutes to talk about a throw. And you're thinking to yourself, how could you possibly talk about something that long for? But again, it was just about up to the minute, like on your mind, just trying to get in not only just the details of the throw, splashing in some NFL stuff, splashing in some statistics, splashing in some buzzwords that kind of generated. And the reason why I got into it is one day, like you, I turned on at 1 a.m. I was flipping through the stations. I saw this NFL show, and I'm thinking to myself, man, they need someone on there that played the game, that can speak, that can, generate some buzz. And what I did was I was at a golf event in Florida. I happened to play golf with the COO of the home shop. And I said, hey, listen, I was like, you guys got this NFL show. It's like, how can I interview for it or whatever? And he's like, I'm not real sure. He's like, let me find out. So like a couple of weeks later, I got a call from them. I said, hey, listen, one of our bosses gave us a call. Why don't you come down to the set? So I went down, and then it literally started 7 straight years of working and selling as their main host. I did 70 shows a year. And remember, these shows could come on at midnight because it features West Coast states, or it could come on at 6 a.m. So now I don't do as many shows. I am specifically just tied in with one company, and we do one day, Thanksgiving, every year, and we go 12 shows from midnight to midnight the entire Thanksgiving day. And we try to sell as many NFL throws as possible, and we break records and do it every single year. I think last year we had 70,000 plus sales in just that 12-hour window, 24-hour window, which was outstanding. But yeah, I've sold, I think it was like close to $15 to $20 million worth of NFL gear in those 30-minute window shows. But I love it. I don't do as many now. I just lock into one. But the one thing I learned from it is you got to have diversity in this business. If you just count on one thing, calling college games or just calling NFL games, it's not going to work out for you. So I learned to be diverse, and that's why I have multiple things going. But you got to put the time and the work in. You can't be, people say, well, just be great in one thing because you're going to struggle. But I like to put that time into everything and sell myself there. So it's been a nice change up for me into my career. And it made the games and calling games and studio shows for ESPN and NFL really easy, because now it's 1 camera, 2 cameras, which is kind of a joke to do versus 5.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess like most things, Anthony, it's more than meets the eye, right?
That's right.
Things are never as easy as they seem. Well, I know you got to go. Just tell us quickly about your podcast.
Yeah, so started a podcast last year called Spittin Fire with Anthony Becht, Dan Grassa. Dan is a co-host of mine. He does a lot on Sirius Major League Baseball, Sirius NFL, ESPN New York, fills in for a lot of those host jobs. I think he's a great young talent that's really blossoming. I wanted to team up with him. We worked together in the Jets pre and post game. So our podcast last year, what we launched is turning into a full-blown studio show, which we tried to bring out week 1 of NFL, but we're waiting a couple more weeks, fine-tuning it. So we'll be able to kind of get through that and push that out in October. You can follow me on Anthony_Becht on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and just find out when that's going to happen. But we're excited about it. We've filmed several shows, but we haven't pushed it out yet. We're just kind of tweaking things. So that'll be out. Stay tuned. That'll be out soon.
Anthony, this was a lot of fun. You're a great guy, interesting guy. Thank you for being on the show.
Yep, Nick, Angela, thank you for having me. I appreciate you both.
We're going to take a short break and be right back with Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl Executive Director Scott Glaser. Stay with us.
This podcast is powered by Tony Faye PR.
Welcome back to Bowl Season Stories. We are staying with the Tampa theme of this show with our next guest. Scott Glaser is Executive Director of the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl. Previously, Glaser worked for the University of South Florida, and also hear that he was a star pitcher for USF back in the day. Scott, thank you so much for joining us for the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I saw who your prior guest was, and that's a tough act to follow. So I'll do my best to provide some good conversation here in the next few minutes.
Scott, people ask me all the time what my favorite bowl is, right? And that's a tough question for me. It's like asking somebody to pick their favorite child. But I always have a soft spot for your game. I had a lot to do with the creation of it, helping launch it in St. Pete back in 2008 with ESPN Events. Your former boss, Pete Durzis, and I worked closely together to start it. But you were named executive director for the Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa 2 years ago. That coincided with the bowl moving from St. Pete across the bay to Tampa, as well as rebranding it as the Gasparilla Bowl. What has that entire experience been like for you?
I'll tell you what, it moved over the year prior to me starting in 2018. I started in 2019. It actually started in name the last year in St. Pete. So, in terms of the prior staff, give them all the credit in the world for recognizing the energy of what the name Gasparilla means to the Tampa Bay community. But with me coming on board 2 years ago, taking a game that transitioned from 10 years in St. Pete, now in year 4 in Hillsborough County, it's an opportunity. It's a challenge. You have 14 years of history of this bowl in general, but trying to lay down roots and trying to rebrand and relaunch in a time that this country's gone through some difficult things, and live entertainment and sports is no different. So for us, aligning with a brand like Gasparilla in Tampa Bay has certainly set us up for success, and it's just continuing to try to work those relationships and create that brand identity that we all try to work towards in our own businesses, and realize at the end of the day there's a football game involved with it as well. So it's exciting times for sure.
Well, I planned on asking you this question down the line here, but you bring it up. Tell us about Gasparilla. What is it? Why is it so important to Tampa Bay and so relevant to the area that you live in?
I'm not sure we have enough time on this call, but I'll do my best. If you can envision, New Orleans and Mardi Gras and that type of an atmosphere, not necessarily the number of days, but Gasparilla is a parade in which, in the early 1900s, Jose Gaspar was this outlaw pirate who ran the waters of West Florida and came into Hillsborough County, and apparently there's a lost treasure in the area. And our partners, the Mystic crew of Gasparilla, took that story and brought it to life in our area. And what is known today as Gasparilla, and it's a parade, downtown on Bayshore Boulevard, right along the bay. Pirate ship comes in, they invade Tampa Bay, 400,000+ people at a night parade, with all the entertainment and excitement as you can imagine. And people live for this. And, when the name, when the bowl was renamed Gasparilla, that was part of it. It was, how do you create an excitement in a community that has so much going on? Tampa Bay does not lose, right? So you cannot be successful in Tampa unless you win. And if you want to win in Tampa, get involved with a bunch of crazy pirates that want to have a little bit of fun. And, I always say, if we could take a little bit of that excitement from Bayshore Boulevard and get it to Ray J on game day, then, we've got a pretty successful opportunity here. A lot of unique names in the bowl industry, as you know, and Gasparilla, along with our title sponsor, Union Home Mortgage, is certainly something that we can have a lot of fun with.
Well, clearly, the Buccaneers have a big presence in town. You got that big pirate ship in the stadium that you share with the Buccaneers. So pirates are a big thing in Tampa, obviously. And you're certainly no stranger to Tampa. You grew up in Brandon, Florida, not too far outside of Tampa. Went to USF, worked in the athletic department of USF for 19 years, and now you're running one of the 2 bowl games in town. How much of an advantage is it for you in this new role to know the community as well as you do?
Well, community is everything. We talk about it regularly about, yes, it's a game, but it's the community impact that bowl season and the bowl industry brings back. And so while Tampa is a large city, it's really small in nature. There's, talk about Team Tampa Bay, which is our local Tampa Bay Sports Commission, kind of coined a number of years ago. And if you think about those words, Team Tampa Bay, it's really powerful. And, with the years of playing sports at USF, I'm a former baseball guy who threw the ball around a little bit, but it's hard to win unless you're a true team, and Team Tampa Bay represents that. And we understand that you have to put in the work to be on that team. We understand everybody has a position that they play. Not everybody's the shortstop or the quarterback. And so we as the Gasparilla Bowl want to be on that team or on that team, and we're ready to play the position that we best fit for our community. So it's sports has been a lot, and it's exciting to be here in the backyard and put on a good football game for our fans.
You mentioned your baseball career. You were a top pitching prospect in high school, drafted by the Yankees, ended up playing in the Pirates organization before returning to Tampa. What have you been able to bring from your experience of playing on teams, especially minor league baseball? You're bussing around, you're bonding together with your teammates, much like your teams do that come to your bowl game for that bowl week. What has those experiences helped? How have they helped you prepare for your current role?
Well, as a former student athlete, again, I was on a college campus for, over 25 years between, playing days and career days. Been a sport administrator. I've been on the field. I've been in the meetings. I've met with the athletic directors. I feel like I understand what the student athlete's looking for, what the administration's looking for, what the spirit squads are looking for, what the alumni. I worked for the Alumni Association for 2 years. So I think if you take all of those experiences, including riding on the bus, and you understand the opportunity you have to impact lives, and impact lives through a game. And that's what it is. It's a game, but it impacts, our lives, for the rest of our lives, and then Nick, your background in sports and being on campus and playing is no different than mine. Although you were in football, I was in baseball, but, I met my wife because of sport, my best friends because of sport. I learned how to win because of sport, but I also learned how to accept defeat through sport, time management, perseverance, all these things that today we all sit, where we do in our daily lives and our careers. And without struggling through that long bus ride with no air conditioning or a bad movie selection, or quite frankly, sitting next to a guy that you didn't necessarily care for, but you had to figure out how to get it done. So the next day on the field, you won as a team. There's just so much behind, that sport, the word sport and what it means. And, for this to be my backyard, like you said, to have the opportunity to lead 1 or 2 bowls in our community and know the life memories that we're going to create. I don't know that everybody recognizes what our games and what our industry and what sport does, but it means a lot to me.
It's funny how you look back at times in your life and what at the time might have seemed like an inconvenience. And I got to ride this bus. We're all crammed in here. You look back at them fondly as, boy, I would do anything to go back and do that again.
I'll tell you, I probably remember more stories off the field than I do about on them. You want to play, you want to win. It's competition, it's a challenge. But, the friendships that you make, the memories that you make, the card game that you got the wrong card, whatever it is, these are the memories that when we get back together, I still help run our baseball alumni golf tournament. And we don't talk as much about the big game we won or lost. We talk about everything else, the experiences walking to class or in the apartment or on the bus ride. Or remember when, the fire alarm got pulled at the hotel and at 3 a.m. before the big game, we're in the park, all these things that just happen that mold these young athletes. It's just going to impact the rest of their life more than they even realize. I never knew it would impact mine the way it did, but it certainly has. And so, again, just an amazing and blessed opportunity that we had to work in this industry.
No question about it. Tell me, when you look at the college football landscape this season, what's anything that surprised you? Any teams that have kind of caught your eye?
No, I mean, obviously there's some teams that, are expected to win some games that aren't, which I love. I'm the 5'9" 3/4" left-handed pitcher that if I was 6+, maybe we would have never met. So I always go for the little guy, right? So I love to see some of these upsets taking place, but nothing that's too surprising. It feels like bowl seasons are around the corner, but there's still such a long season ahead of us at the same time. So, I look for these athletes to continue to compete and anybody can win. And I love that Cinderella type story. And, nothing's going to surprise me. Nobody thought Clemson was going to lose. Clemson's an outstanding team, but but those stories are great, right? The winning team created a memory for a lifetime. And so I just look forward to following the rest of the season and see how we can make some selections down the road that make sense for our business.
Well, you're right. Bowl season is around the corner. There's going to be a group of teams that get their fifth win this weekend, which means the following week there's going to be a handful of teams that get their sixth win and punch their ticket to bowl season, and then it really starts getting fun. So, getting close to that point. Any predictions from you on who's going to be in the Gasparilla Bowl this year?
No predictions for me. Obviously, ESPN events, we own and operate 17 bowl games, across the country. We as a company are always looking for the best matchup for our communities. Part of our jobs to drive tourism, right? But it's about the matchup. It's about the alumni travel. It's about regionalizing some games and giving some people some experiences to travel to places that they haven't been before. So, 8 conference agreements, 2 independents. We're what's considered a primary. Doesn't mean that we'll necessarily select them, but we are slated for an SEC ACC type matchup if there are enough teams that are eligible. We have great partnerships with the American and with Conference USA and the MAC and SWAC and BYU and Army. So we have a lot of options, which is great. Like you said, as teams roll into being bowl eligible here in the next week or two, you start to look and see how those teams move forward throughout the season, and it'll be a great matchup. We're 2 days prior to Christmas. It's probably going to be 75 to 80 degrees and sunny in Tampa, Florida, and who wouldn't want to be here?
Well, as you just said, Scott, the Union Home Mortgage Gasparilla Bowl is scheduled for Thursday, December 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. The game will be broadcast on ESPN. Thanks, Scott, for being on the show. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate your insight and for spending time with us.
No, I appreciate the opportunity and thankful for all the things you're doing with bowl season, and I look forward to working together even more throughout the season. Thanks so much.
And thanks all of you for listening to this week's Bowl Season Stories podcast. Please join us next week when we will welcome another lineup of great guests. If you like the show, we'd appreciate you dropping a 5-star rating for the podcast. And as always, you can follow all the podcast and bowl season news on our website, bowlseason.com, and on social media at Bowl Season. Thanks for listening.